One of the key themes here is collaboration, how financial institutions can tap the innovation of startups. Also how government bodies like the Monetary Authority of Singapore can tap expertise from other regulators to work together to deepen the fintech industry. Let's get perspective from Sopnendu Mohanty, his Chief Fintech Officer at MAS. Good morning.
Good morning.
Highly successful, the biggest fintech event in the world. Why do you think that is the case? I mean, so many people are saying that this cannot be replicated elsewhere in the world.
I think the biggest reason why it has happened in Singapore is the trust. The whole policymaker, startups, banks, entrepreneurs, we're trying to bring together the common story. And Singapore is a great platform to have this open discussion without any biases in either side. And that's the biggest reason I think everybody's coming together. And it's quite amazing for us because we didn't expect it to be so large and so huge.
Collaboration is one of the key themes. MAS recently tied up with HKMA. Why Hong Kong?
I think Hong Kong is a natural partner for us. Being a too large financial center, good to get connected. And as I always say, innovation is not proprietary. It is a collaboration which makes it better and much more sustainable. And that's the reason why we work with Hong Kong to build this large collaborative global trade network, which makes sense. I think logical that makes sense. But that's not the end of the whole thing. We are going to connect to ASEAN countries, to Japan, wherever the whole trade connectivity comes through will be our approach to bring all this thing together.
Both sides are pushing through with blockchain. Would it make sense to link the two eventually?
So the whole blockchain is all about standard and simple connectivity. You cannot build a blockchain which is proprietary, different from different jurisdictions. As you bring use cases together, it becomes much more standardized, much more infrastructure, scalable infrastructure. So that's the whole deal behind this whole collaboration.
So can that be pushed even further? Because the Bank of England, for instance, is also doing blockchain. So it does make sense to eventually link everybody up.
Absolutely. I think there's no argument on that.
When do you see that happening?
I think we're kind of front-running the whole maturity of the technology. I think we're going to take a step back. Each jurisdiction should pick up good use cases, experiment on that. Once they understand the whole technology, then we should start connecting. Yesterday, Joe Ito was the keynote speaker. He's talked about the whole running ahead of the technology is happening now. Just take a step back, understand the technology, build a stack, do a lot of experiment, and then connect the dots. That's the most sustainable way to go about on the whole blockchain thing.
What is the biggest challenge then in pushing it through?
It's just the technology has to mature. You can't just grow it if you want to grow it like tomorrow. It has to go through the cycle of maturity.
I want to talk about big data. There's a sense that perhaps, let's take Europe, for example.
Sure.
Next year, it will require banks to share their data.
Yes.
On the consumers to third parties.
Sure.
Is that something Singapore should be working towards as well?
My view is that the whole data sharing has already happened in Singapore. The whole API economy which has come for last 2 years. Yesterday, MD Ravi Menon talked about 270 APIs which is up in Singapore by the local banks, which shows that data sharing is having a natural synergy in this ecosystem. Of course, you can always mandate, but my view is let the ecosystem naturally share the data because they see a bigger value by connecting. And I want to bring a very interesting point here. People say bank has big data. It is actually outside the bank the big data exists. It is better for the bank to connect to that outside big data and be part of the whole big data connectivity. I don't think we should mandate that much to make banks connect.
But having said that, how do you ensure that data that is shared is within limits?
Of course, I think the whole data privacy, data residency, the data protection is part of the whole policymakers' dilemma. We got to find a strong infrastructure which allows consumer to be well aware of the data they're sharing. And as a part of our thinking, how to build a national digital identity, the whole data connected to that identity, how do we get consent from the consumer, the data is being shared. So the whole practice has to evolve to a much more sustainable data sharing practice. And I think that's what Singapore is doing extremely well, being thoughtful about the whole data piece.
Singapore has spent and continues to spend on fintech in a big way.
Sure.
What has worked and what hasn't?
I think we just started. so
what has worked already?
I think we have definitely done well to make Singapore as a platform for collaboration. And I always say, Singapore is not a large market for fintech company to get excited here. They come here just to collaborate, build that first product, start that experiment, work with the regulators, make the product much more sustainable, then go and export globally. So Singapore will continue to become the place where they'll start the journey. And that is our strength. And I believe that's where we'll continue to focus.
What hasn't worked?
I think there are many things you can say doesn't work here, but it's a part of learning. The talent has to work because the talent is a big shortage for us. We got to fix the talent piece. Also, the culture of risk taking. Unlike Silicon Valley, they take a lot of risk. Here, we have to develop that risk-taking ability for the entrepreneurs. The risk capital has to come in. So these are the few things we have to work on as we go forward.
Is there a sense of distrust among startups? There's a sense that perhaps when startups tie up with financial institutions which are established already, that they may lose their IP.
I think the word IP is kind of overhyped. I think it's a matter of how quickly you can get there, and it's eventually the consumer experience will drive everything. Of course, there's a technology IP, and Singapore is a great place to protect IP. We are the top-ranked center for IP protection. In fact, that's one of the reasons why people want to start things out of Singapore to protect the IP. But we all know, on the long run, everything gets replicated. It's the consumer who's going to drive the whole innovation and the whole adoption of the whole ecosystem. So I'm not that overly worried about the IP protection, the IP issues around the startups. Startups will protect the IP. Singapore is a great place. Get your IP registered in Singapore. We have excellent laws to protect.
All right, Sopnendu Mohanty, we thank you for your insights. There you have it. Coming to you from the Singapore Fintech Festival here in the Lion City.